Wow, this one's really, really difficult. But yeah, I mean, obviously, for a while now, we've been seeing a series of wide-scale layoffs within the games industry. And when it comes to doing DF Direct Weekly, it's something we don't often talk about because obviously you can commiserate with people that have lost their jobs, but the scale of the of the impact just on a single individual is not something I think we can actually encapsulate within a podcast as such. But this week, man, 900 jobs lost at Sony, the entire closure of the London studio, EA shedding staff, big name projects being killed. But there is some light at the end of the tunnel, which we'll talk about in our next news topic. But for this one, it's really, really difficult to talk about. But I think the underlying thing that's happening here is that, well, suddenly it seems that the business model driving this entire industry is not seen as sustainable. Therefore, these cuts are being made. I do think there are much better ways in which this could have happened. I do think there are ways in which the industry could have transitioned more gracefully towards a new model. But ultimately, it seems that the need to appease shareholders and financial analysts is taking precedent there, which is of extreme disappointment. John, where do you want to start with this? I mean, I don't know where to start.
I mean, I would start by saying I don't think this works. We've seen time and again that layoffs like this don't actually fix the problem. And I don't think this is going to fix whatever problems they're dealing with. And something else needs to change. I mean, you just take away the creatives. You introduce uncertainty into the studio. Now people are fearing for their jobs. You're not getting the best work out of them that way. And then you look at something like Insomniac. These guys are the all-stars of PlayStation. They've basically kept the PS5 alive, I might argue, with their releases in a way that no other Sony studio has been able to deliver.
Agreed.
And then they're being punished with layoffs as well. I think that's frankly unbelievable. Pardon my French.
That's fine.
Like I think it's unacceptable. All of this stuff is unacceptable, and I think it's very short-sighted. And I hope that these shareholders, I hope these people get what's coming to them somehow. I'll just say that much. But yeah.
Yeah,
it's crap.
I mean,
it's crap shit.
Insomniac used to be an independent studio, of course, and they did put out a statement which, while not overtly critical of what has happened, they are clearly making their displeasure.
As they should.
Yeah, plainly evident. And exactly so, because, as you say, John, the amount of output that these guys have put out across this generation, this kind of threadbare generation, if you like, these guys have delivered time and time again. Marvel Spider-Man at the moment, second game there, 10 million copies sold. I mean, what more can they do? I mean, that's just, astonishing. Naughty Dog 2, there are layoffs there. I mean, Naughty Dog, obviously they've had that issue with their multiplayer game being canned, years worth of work lost. You would expect that maybe there would be some redeployment of resources and redundancies there, but my God, Insomniac, what's going on there? And the closure of the London studio seems to, and job losses at Firesprite seems to indicate that Sony are, how can I say it? That they're not going to support PlayStation VR 2 with first-party titles in the way that we would have expected or hoped.
Right.
So it's almost as if the PSVR 2 is also being sort of jettisoned by default. Man,
It's not the Sony that I think most people loved anymore. Like, they've reduced their lineup. It's so slim now compared to what it used to be, and which also highlights just the issues with modern game development at this scale.
Well, that's an interesting point. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, Ollie Jacobs, DF supporter, chimes in with this. Herman Holst's comments about quote-unquote delivering the immersive narrative-driven stories that PlayStation Studios is known for in the wake of these layoffs is concerning to me. I've definitely enjoyed the time I've spent with games such as Spider-Man and Last of Us, but the loss of Japan Studios signals a greater departure from what Sony was to me. A repertoire of focused and thought-provoking games that try different things as opposed to following what I would personally consider very safe formulas designed for mass market appeal. I was taken aback recently while revisiting Astro's Playroom as it occurred to me just how little a PS6 version of the same game would be able to say about our current generation. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this. Do you think this could change going forward? Well, Sony seems to be on a route forward that is bearing fruit. Helldivers 2. I mean, we've obviously got our issues with the live service side of things, but Helldivers 2 has been an incredibly successful game where the success, I think, has been warranted. But he's quite right. I mean, this is something we've talked about on the Direct for a long time now. The diversity and the experimentation and the innovation and the fun that was synonymous with PlayStation has kind of evaporated in favor of these immersive, narrative-driven stories, which, you know, obviously they have their place, right? And they are mega successful, but as part of a repertoire, as opposed to the be-all and end-all, I think that's kind of what is problematic with Sony and PlayStation at the moment. Alex, haven't had your thoughts on this, but it's not great, is it?
I think it is actually. John was trying to hint at that just a second ago, that I do think it is endemic of the larger strive towards these larger narrative-based games, just like the supporter just mentioned, where if you're targeting all these large development cycles of 5 to 7 years or something like that, and you're putting all these eggs in one proverbial basket, when one of these games does not meet the criteria to be as wildly successful as some sort of financial analyst would like for growth purposes, because it's not just about making your money back. It's always about growing and growing and growing and growing. As soon as that happens, then you aren't meeting these targets and you start having to reduce because the line needs to go up mentality. And I don't think it is at all sustainable. And I really think it would make a lot of sense for Sony to, I mean, them doing it now after having committed to it for so long is probably going to be very hard. But they probably should not scale back development in the sense of reduce studios as they're doing right now, but they should look at entirely different project types. That's how I view it, at least, because I don't like the next Naughty Dog game. I have no idea when it's going to come out. The next God of War,
years away,
very far off. Yeah, I mean, Insomniac is the one carrying the entire PS5 on its back, like John said, in many respects, with them releasing 4 titles. They've released a lot, and them being punished as a part of this just shows how kind of backwards it is, just in terms of just like logic. It just seems so wrong. And I really do think they need to start targeting different titles. It's the one advantage that I think, Microsoft and Xbox do not have these large tentpole releases, and they've largely kind of failed at doing that.
They're hoping to address that this year, of course.
That's the nice part, I guess. But they've also done a really good job of having like middle tier releases and a greater diversity of portfolio there.
Yeah, agreed.
Going for those PC only games, strategy, Pentiment, Hi-Fi Rush. You've got your first-person shooters, you got your third-person shooters, you got your live service titles. It's been at least pretty diverse in that respect, and I think that's a strength there that Sony really should probably have as well too, to buy the time in between their large, expensive narrative third-person games with lots of cutscenes. I think they really need different games. And this is not the fault of any of the developers, I would say, that are just making the games, doing the art, doing the programming. This is like a philosophy of the entire Sony studios, as well as to some degree producers that want these games out there to be the only type of game they target. Yeah.
I think the issue has been that my figures might be wrong here, but from memory, the profit margins were like 9% during the PlayStation 4 era, and it seems to be slipping now. I think 6% might be the new number, which is causing alarm, which has started this chain reaction of stuff within Sony. But yes, I don't think the solution is automatically cut everything and lose all of that talent that you've painstakingly acquired. I mean, they've literally it's not so long ago that they bought Firesprite, for example, and cuts are being made. The London studio has got decades worth of pedigree and history, and that's just gone. Just generally, if you look historically at the treatment of UK developers by Sony, it's not a particularly great track record. There've been issues, obviously, recently with Media Molecule as well. Media Molecule, I mean, when you're looking for like innovation, fun, everything that PlayStation should be, I mean, these are the guys that have consistently delivered over the years. The founders are all gone now, as far as I can tell. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty bleak look. I just can't help but feel that there is a better way here to manage these kind of transitions, and it's deeply saddening, and
yeah, they're coasting at this point in this way that's very dangerous, where they really are putting all their eggs in one basket. And games these days, they're being asked to, everything's got to be the biggest thing. So, you have your story-based games, but you also need to make sure people keep playing it with these live service elements. You need to make sure the world is the biggest thing ever. You need to have the best graphics. You need to have Naughty Dog level polish on everything. All of this stuff takes way too long to make. It's way too expensive. And if it fails, it's a catastrophe. And they've thrown out all the other small games that they used to make, all the medium scale games they used to make. And now they just have this they just have a small handful of studios making these types of games that absolutely need to succeed. And even if they do succeed, apparently that's not enough. This is not sustainable. It's not going to work long term. And right now they're lucky that they have the position in the market that they do. I'm going to say it's luck, a lot of it. Both Sony and Microsoft have stumbled this gen in different ways. Nintendo's really they're doing I mean, they have their own issues, but they're doing pretty all right comparatively. And I'm definitely concerned about the future of everything in the industry right now. And I feel like there's just you just need to look at the way success happens. They try to manufacture success, and I don't think it always works. Sometimes surprises, when the old PlayStation and a lot of these other platforms, they used to create so many games at different scales. They didn't always know which ones would hit and which ones would not. Sometimes it'd just be like a small success, but find like a dedicated audience. Sometimes it would blow up out of nowhere. We've seen it this year, even with games like Helldivers 2 or Power World, where you don't, I mean, Helldivers 2 did take a long time to make it, and I guess Power World 2, but still, they're kind of unknowns that just kind of come out of nowhere and they light up the sales charts, right?
And they won't have The Last of Us level budgets.
They don't need to. No. They shouldn't. People want fun games. Power World was a broken piece of garbage at first. Like, the game is fun and funny, and that shows what matters, right? People had fun with it despite the fact that it was it was extremely janky. There was heart there. And I think that's okay. And I think they need to get comfortable again with making these smaller games. Look what's happening in the indie space, but you get that first party sort of prestige behind it again. That's what drove PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 and even PS3 to a degree, I'd say. And PS4 was they were at least getting games out at a more regular case, but this generation is it's the weirdest generation, because there's actually, objectively, there are tons of great games to play, like an absolute tons. So it's actually kind of good, but at the same time, we've never seen one so devoid of creativity from the big players, at least some of them, where it just feels like they're doing nothing. I like that point that Ollie Jacobs made about Astro's Playroom. You put the PS5 in there for a PS6 version of the game, and what do you have? Like the detachable disk drive, the need to activate it. Is there a mini game where you activate the disk drive over the internet? Do you have the PSVR 2 there sitting in a recycle bin? I mean, do you play a level that's comprised of remakes of levels from other games? What do you do? I don't know. It's just I'm feeling kind of down about all this, so pardon the rants.
I love it.
Something I've got to tackle here. This is a point made by supporter 1040 STF. A few hours before Sony announced 900 layoffs and the closure of London studio, we saw pictures on social media of Jim Ryan celebrating his retirement at London studio with himself and employees smiling together. These pics were 5 or 6 years old. How cynical was that? this is another issue which I think needs to be brought to the fore, which is the concept of kindness. Let's say that all of these layoffs were unavoidable, right? Yeah, let's just take that as a concept. I don't agree with it, but there it is.
Right.
The concept that, assuming on the face of it that everything we saw on social media is true, the concept that, Jim Ryan would go and visit a studio, which he must surely have been fully aware of would be like facing closure in a short period of time thereafter. It's really unkind. It's not the way I would consider management to be behaving. I just can't get my head around that. That was the thing on the day of the announcements of this. I was obviously quite upset at the sheer scale of the closures, the seemingly arbitrary nature of who was facing redundancy here, and then that lands, and I was just furious for the rest of the day, angry. Maybe there's more to it than meets the eye, but certainly Sony didn't seem to do anything to address that.
Just to clarify, I think when you read it, you said 5 to 6 years old, it sounded like.
But 5 to 6 days, yes.
So yeah, like within a week.
6 days, yes.
I think that's really important to that point.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's, it's just really made me angry.
The Jim Ryan victory tour at London studio. Way to go, Jim.
Well,
yeah, it's embarrassing.
It's all coming apart now, seemingly. The whole strategy that's been pursued for the past few years has seemingly not proven to be sustainable, as we've been talking about on the Direct for like what seems like years now. But, I mean, what can we say? Moving on from Sony, we had EA shedding staff as well. Looks like Respawn's first-person shooter based on the Star Wars franchise has been terminated. That's not going to be happening.
What a great idea, EA. Yeah.
That is such a
you
bad
guys
idea.
Are just the best. Just killing off. It's not like Respawn hasn't delivered before, right? Like, nope, just kill it off. Okay, whatever.
Yeah, they're make darlings in the first-person shooter space, and they make
big brain move.
Super wildly they obviously get Star Wars in spite of the technical aspects of certain of those games. Like, they obviously get it. Like,
you read
those
freaking statements from these guys at the top, and it's just like word nonsense.
Yeah, word salad. It doesn't. It's
we're
just
gonna
nonsense.
make it. We're gonna be the best studio. We're gonna focus on our strengths. Like, we're the best. We're the best. Everything's gonna be better. It's ridiculous at this point. It's just stupid.
It's bad.
The funny thing is, of course, well, not funny, peculiar, should we say,
it's
is
not
that the concept that Respawn hasn't been able to iterate on Titanfall 2 in any way, in any genre, in any franchise, is like one of the biggest, missed opportunities of the industry for like, I don't know how long. It's astonishing.
That game is so beloved now, and it has a cult following, but EA sent it to die back in the day. They released that right on top of Battlefield. They pushed Battlefield over Titanfall 2. It like the way they've handled that franchise. Like, thank goodness they at least got their whatever it's
Star
called.
Wars?
No, the other game,
Apex.
the Apex. That's right,
Apex Legends.
They got that. That's something. But come on, man, Titanfall 2 is so good, and people know it now. It was missed at the time, yes, but now that has cachet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Also, the studio that was handling the campaign for Battlefield has been closed. Criterion will be taking point on that. I mean, Criterion have experience with Battlefield. They've been a support studio.
Did they do Hardline?
No, that was somebody else. That was the LA studio.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. They've been a support studio for Battlefield, so I guess, they do have experience there, but, you can't help but wonder whether Criterion should be doing other things. Need for Speed didn't land as it should do, but the game was brilliant. Mm-hmm. I mean, it just seems to be like it's all numbers driven as opposed to, product driven. I think the decisions that are being made there, it's astonishing. Also, recently reports of Supermassive laying off 90 employees. I think there is a sort of wider issue here, which is that, well, for years we've had zero interest rates effectively on loans. That's no longer the case. So the amount of money that can be brought into the industry is the taps have turned off, so to speak. So there are reasons that we're going to be seeing this contraction going forward, but it doesn't make any of this news easier to talk about or report.
Man, I could see some of those guys making a QTE sequence similar to the other supermassive games, like the Dark Pictures, Jim Ryan, or not that it's Sony, but you're getting chased around an office by like an evil Jim Ryan with like red eyes, and they dodge the wrong way, unfortunately.
Before we round off this incredibly depressing discussion, we got this question here from Mad Monk. Given the layoffs and realization that the current production processes aren't economically viable, what is being/could be done to make those production processes more efficient? E.g. engines becoming easier to work with, AI co-pilot, streaming coding, RT-only games, meaning less manual work on lighting, etc. Less cost means less risk, which means more creativity, which seems sorely needed in the industry. I think there's no one answer to this, right? And I do think, obviously there is a major sort of AI backlash. But similarly, if you consider AI as a tool to aid creatives as opposed to replacing them, then it becomes a different story, in my opinion. Good tools are good tools, right? Obviously, we're seeing things that are happening in the likes of Unreal Engine 5, which are specifically designed to effectively democratize high-end production values and stuff like gigantic open worlds, so that even indie developers can do it. I suspect that this is probably one of the reasons why Unreal Engine 5 has become so popular recently, simply because that's their focus, right? To effectively cut costs, if you like. I don't know, Alex, any thoughts on this?
I mean, I could see regarding the RT thing, it won't save anyone's job. But in reducing the scope of a game, I do think there's probably something to be said about how much iteration time exists, because you have to bake out lighting in a level. But that is only tempered. If you're saving more time by not having to bake out lighting in a level or something like that, and having less iteration time as a result of that, that has to be tempered by the fact that the producers and the developers should try and then use that time or to reduce scope, or to use it wisely to fulfill other tasks in the same amount of time that would have been done there, and not use it as an excuse to balloon out again to a larger size.
Right.
Which I think is not at all guaranteed. And that's another thing that I don't think AI usage necessarily guarantees. If you just get fixated on the usage of one tool, and you kind of want to make it as a part of a cornerstone experience of the game, you could end up spending so much time iterating and trying to get that so perfect that you end up just losing sight of actually shipping a game in a good amount of time. So I don't know. I don't think there's a technical solution necessarily to what's happening. It's a philosophical one.
Right. I think it's basically, yeah. I mean, there's going to be a whole range of things that you can use to increase productivity, right? But I think the major challenge here is essentially the nature of the kind of games that are being made, and the fact that everything requires 5 years to develop and $100 million budgets minimum. That's not sustainable, right? And that's where things can change. I mean, the role of the shorter game, I think, has never been more important now from a financial aspect, but also from what the kind of player wants perspective. Not every game has to have 50 hours of play attached to it, and not every game needs to have that intense level of money invested in it, and it can still be fun. And we've seen that borne out with the likes of Helldivers 2 and Power World. So I think there's going to be a sort of reevaluation of what games are over the next few years. The issue is that there's going to be short-term implications for all of this, which is that we could see games that are even sort of close to completion actually be cancelled, and then once the ramifications of this fully set in, the obvious conclusion will be we'll be seeing fewer games in the years to come because they do take years to develop. Yeah. So, well, I guess we just have to wait and see what happens there. But man, this has been really, really depressing.
It's time to leverage the new wave of gamers coming up right now. The Roblox players. Their standards for graphics are so low that we may as well start back from zero again and just like build up. They'll come at that and be like, dang, this looks amazing. But it's like, PS2 era visuals. And I've seen
nothing
it.
wrong with the PS2 era, John.
God,
what I'm saying is that the PS2 era is like a pretty good spot in terms of like the visuals can look pretty darn attractive and the games run really smooth and they feel great to play. And it's like, you know what? I'm happy with that. I'd be happy with games that look like that more often.
Yeah, I would be too.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, what happened to Geometry Wars, right?
Right.
It's a classic example of a game that
sorry, Rich. When Bizarre Creations went out of business, it went away.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying, right?
I know, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Bringing it back to layoffs.
That game was like one of the greatest things I have ever played. Geometry Wars 2 specifically was incredible.
Dude, I know.
Incredible. Didn't require $100 million of investment as far as I'm aware.
People loved it.
I still think about it. I still want to play it quite often. I mean, incredible game. I mean, it's time to think a bit more, holistically, widely about what people actually want to spend time doing. I think maybe that's one of the reasons why Switch does pretty well, because you do tend to get a broader diversity, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Nintendo itself brings the diversity as well with their games. There's a lot on there. I mean, and some of it, it's hit or miss, not for everybody, but they sure are delivering.
Yeah. They sure are delivering a lot of Wii U games.
Well, they did do that, but since nobody bought the Wii U.
I get what you're saying.